one of the really powerful new features of AWS is something called Cloud9. And if you search for Cloud9 on the console, it'll actually give you the ability to select it. And then what you can do is you can open up a new development environment in Cloud9. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new environment. So what is this and why do I care about it for serverless? Well, one of the really powerful things about a cloud-based development environment is that it solves many problems that typically come up. So one of them is you need to have proper access via API keys when you're developing locally. And often that can be a huge vulnerability in terms of security. So if you accidentally check in your source code, into your source code, your API keys, you can get your account compromised. Likewise, it's also very trouble prone to go back and forth between your local environment and the cloud. Maybe you have to copy files back and forth. But in the cloud environment, such as Cloud9, you're automatically in the environment that you're going to be deploying against. So when you're copying data back and forth between different nodes in AWS, the copies are very quick. Likewise, if you test a service, it's also from somewhere inside of AWS instead of your own laptop. So it solves a really particular problem, and it appears that the future is really going to involve these cloud-based development environments, especially for things like serverless. So that's really the main takeaway here. So we're going to go through and create a Cloud9 based environment. I'm going to say hello Cloud9. And then a lot of times it's a good idea to put some kind of descriptive information for other people on your team. So we can say this is a sandbox. And now when I go to the next step, it gives me a few options here that we'll discuss. So one of them is that you can either select an existing server. Let's say you have, let's say a Kubernetes server running and there's a particular instance that you want to connect to there. You could reuse that. Likewise, you can create a new instance. And I think this is probably the typical way to get started is create a new instance. And that's what we're going to do. And then in terms of instance type, you have a micro instance, which is 1 gig of RAM and 1 CPU. You also can choose between, let's say, an M4 large, which would be a couple CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM, or also you can select maybe really large instances like in the case of this one, 32 gigs of RAM, or even a larger. You can have a 40 virtual CPU instance with 160 gigs of RAM. So you have actually a lot of choices here to use in terms of the task you're selecting. In our case, we're going to just select micro. We'll use the free tier. And then the other thing to discuss is that you have two different platforms you can choose from. So you have Amazon Linux, which is my recommendation for most things you're going to do. It's probably a good idea to use the operating system that everything else in AWS is going to run on. But another option as well is Ubuntu. And Ubuntu server, you can select this. And you could also provision an Ubuntu environment as well. So this is actually a really powerful feature that really takes away this problem of needing to provision servers with EC2 or pick which configuration you want. There's a very simple dialog here that allows us to get a cloud-based development environment. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the cost-saving settings, and this might be the killer feature of the Cloud9 development environment, is that automatically after 30 minutes it'll stop, and so you don't have to worry about getting charged with really expensive configurations, or spinning something up and forgetting about it. It's designed for you to, as a developer, develop on it, and then it'll automatically shut down afterwards. So you can change that if you wanted to, and you could say, maybe only shut down after 4 hours. But in my experience, this setting has never really had a problem, and it takes, let's say 30 seconds to wake it back up again. So I think this is a great default setting. Additionally, you could go through here and configure roles for Cloud9, and you could configure specifically what kind of environment you'd like Cloud9 to have access to. And then also you can change what VPC. In my case, I'm going to leave all these default because I don't need to configure those. And then the next step is once you've done that, you're able to actually go through, get a preview section here, and then it'll allow you to create the environment, and now I'm provisioning an instance that I can use and develop with.